everybody, and welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've got an epic show ahead, but just remember, if any of you have experiences you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. You can either email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com or head over to paranormalportal.net and scroll down and find the button that says Interview Me, and that'll allow you to look at a calendar of possible times and dates and find a date that works for you. Love to hear your stories, so definitely get in touch with me. Hey everybody, welcome to the Paranormal Portal podcast. I'm your host, Brent Thomas, and a special thank you to all of you guys for tuning in every week and checking out the episodes. And remember, there's a great big back catalog of episodes you might not have heard yet, so be sure to check those out as well. If you like what you're hearing, please give me a follow, a subscribe, or whatever, and if you have the ability, give me a review. I'd love to read what you guys think. And as always, special thank you to those of you out there that continue to let people know about the shows. You guys are making this grow every day, and I thank you for it. I've got a fantastic show lined up for you guys today. I am joined by Jeff Guichard from the United Kingdom, who's here to share a whole series of strange events that he's experienced, and we're going to dive into that now, so hang on. Here we go. Hey, Jeff, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on, brother.
Absolutely no problem at all, Brent. Really good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and you and I have been chatting now for a while, and you're very much a kindred spirit, so I appreciate you making the time to come on the show and share your experiences. But I guess the most natural place to start, or at least my most natural place to start, is where did this start for you?
Oh, I suppose as a child, my upbringing was quite tumultuous and it was very chaotic. And because of that, I suppose it was, I've always tried to escape the situation by going into a fantasy world, really. So into my own head, or, disappearing from the general area that I was. So I was always very open-minded to a lot of stuff, read a lot of books. I also love my science fiction, fantasy. From an early age, as young as I can remember, I've always had really lucid dreams, full colour, the ability to know I'm in a dream, ask questions and kind of walk around a lot. So I can only assume the chaos of a youth and having the ability to dream. Maybe that's it. Maybe I was just a daydreamer, but that's probably where it started. But, I have to caveat most of this. I'm not a paranormal fan in a way. I can't watch horror films. Yeah. I don't read horror books. All the stuff that's happened to me really is nothing I've welcomed. I'm not really into it. So, which makes it even more unusual, the stuff that has happened, because I'm generally quite skeptical. But yeah, it's been from there, I would say.
Oh, okay. So you feel like that's the beginning of your awareness of this stuff, or what was the first experience? You're like, wait a minute, something's not right here. This doesn't make sense.
When I was a child. So my parents got divorced and we moved to the Isle of Wight to be near my grandparents. Okay. And the Isle of Wight's a small diamond-shaped island off the bottom of England. It's very small. You could drive around it in a day. Okay. But its heyday was in the Victorian period. So most of the buildings are Victorian or older. Wow. So it's very seafaring. It's a lovely place to be, but it's very grandiose in its architecture. And as you know, the Victorians, they built houses almost mausoleums, big doors, giant windows. Sure. They're very dark, mysterious places. So yeah, myself, my sister, and my mum fled like refugees really to the Isle of Wight. We moved to the very bottom tip, which is a place called Ventner, and my mum managed to buy a two-bed flat or apartment, you'd call it, which was we moved in and strange things started to happen. I was very, very young, but I suppose I was about 8 years old. My sister's a year older, so she was like 9. And it was just my mum, me, my sister, and my grandparents coming around to help redecorate. The flat my mum bought was the old woman that lived there. She'd obviously passed on. The place was absolutely, it was Victorian. You know, there was the old plant pots and the wallpaper was really old, and it all needed redecorating. So we set about that. So my grandparents came down and we all mucked in, me and my sister, stripping wallpaper, and it was one of the rooms far at the back that overlooked the town. It was on a hill, and then on a clear day you could see the seaside was right in front of you, the sea, and then if the weather was good you could see France. It was that close to as far as you ever want to be to France, to be honest, but that's where it was. And the back room, there was a bathroom, a toilet at the front, my sister and I's room, a sitting room, and my mum's room. And the sitting room was the one where we stripped the wallpaper off. And on top of the original plaster, this place was probably built in the 1890s, 1900s. And it would ever done the plastering had drawn a load of caricatures on the walls. And I don't know why I remember it, but I remember they were very strange. They were like really caricatures of people with big noses, drinking wine and big eyes and like pointy ears. It was very scary, but they were all around the room, floor to ceiling. And this room was about 20 foot by 20 foot. And I remember at the time thinking, this is a bit strange. And then we ripped the kitchen, and as you do, the bathroom out. My grandfather, who was a very handy man, God rest his soul, and he came around and did a lot of work there. And shortly after that, it all got very strange. So my mum, I would hear, and my sister would hear, so would my mum, it would hear footsteps up the hallway going to the toilet at the front of the house. And I used to think it was my mum. My mum used to think it was us. So we never really said, but we'd hear these footsteps. The basin taps used to turn on their own, but not a trickle, the full bore taps splashing up the walls and everything. We used to have to run up and turn them off, Toilet used to flush on its own. And strangely enough, because I spoke to my sister this week and I said, what do you recall? And we had recalled the same things, but I used to hear a parrot, the squawk of a parrot. I was young and I used to think that must be a crow or it's a bird. And in my brain, even when I was young, thinking, no, that's a parrot. That doesn't sound like a normal bird. But I used to hear it. But during the day, these footsteps could be during the day. They could be any time of the day. And then I had very bad tonsillitis, which is a throat infection, and I was ill there. My sister started her journey of being epileptic in that house. My mum, she shut the big sash windows, the giant windows. She shut it, lifted it up to let some air in, and as she turned round, the window came back down. She tried to catch it, smashed her hands up.
Ow.
Yes, quite badly. And then when she turned round, she fainted and fell against the wall and smashed her face up. So there was a lot of incidents and accidents that happened there, combined with the weird noises. We used to smell lavender.
Really?
And yes, lavender up the hallway and weird knocking. Doors used to open. But it's a strange thing, but it was so chaotic then that we never sat around a table as a family and went, oh, did you hear that weird sound? You just didn't, because it was so, my mum was, trying to form relationships and my grandparents, and it was all very chaotic. So it was only after the event that I just thought that was strange. And then talking to my mum, this is where it puts the icing on the cake. My mum, there was no work on the island, so she had to go and work on the mainland. And so she worked in London during the week. She used to come home late Friday night. And if it was around about the time that we were at my grandparents' and we weren't in bed, she used to come and pick us up, and then we'd go back to the apartment and spend the weekend there together. It was lovely. But one night she came over, the ferry was late, so she was really, really late. It was about 10 o'clock at night. So instead of picking us up from my grandparents, she drove straight to the apartment. And when you walked through the main door was on a street. You had this, I can only describe as a greenhouse, but it was a glass porch.
Okay.
And then you had the door to the ground floor flat to the left, the door on the right, which is to our flat, and right beyond that door was a flight of stairs up to the top. And the light switch was on the outside, and the door was made of stained glass, as Victorian doors are.
Sure.
So my mum got back 10 o'clock, really tired, all of their bags, and she got to the door, turned the light on, went to open the door, looked up the stairs, and there was somebody stood at the top of the stairs.
Oh.
Yeah,
oh,
and my
wow.
mum only told me this about 10 years ago. She didn't want to scare us as children, and
Sure.
she said, she looked up and she could tell it was an old woman. It was kind of bent over, but stood at the top of the stairs looking at her and she just dropped her bags, ran, left all her bags there, ran, got in her car and drove up and stayed with my grandparents. And it wasn't long after that she decided to sell it, because it was like quite consistent. And as I said before, I've had quite lucid dreams, and I wasn't even thinking about the apartment at all. I mean, God, I was 40-something years old, and I had a really vivid dream. I was in the flat, really vivid, as they always are, full colour.
Sure.
And I was stood in the hallway upstairs, and there was a woman still with me, but dressed, I could tell she was in her 30s, 40s. Mm-hmm. She was dressed in the 20s style, the wallpaper, the decor. There was a jardiniere, which is a big plant stand with a fern in it, over to the side, full colour. And I knew it was her. I knew it was the woman. I just knew it. And I said to her, what, were you up? Why were you so angry about? She said, I wasn't. She said, I was really confused as to why people were in my house. And I said, well, I'm sorry. She said, I really miss my husband. And I said, oh, why? What happened? And she said, he died. I said, how? She said, the war. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And it kind of, the conversation halted a bit. And I said, have you got a parrot? And she went, yeah. I said, can I see it? And she went, yes. And we walked into this is in a dream, as vivid as I'm talking to you now. Yeah. Walked into the back room, which had all the drawings on the wall, this study. And there was a big gold cage on the floor with a green parrot in it.
Oh, neat.
And and I said, I've heard the parrot. And then I woke up, oh, gone. Yeah. Oh, interestingly, I forgot about this bit. So she did tell me her name, but she said, you can call me Albie.
Albie, okay.
Albie. And I thought, that's strange. And I said to my wife years later, I said, I had this strange dream. I do have strange dreams. And I said, Albie. I said, but it doesn't seem like a girl's name. But yeah, it's a real traditional Victorian 20s girl's name. Oh. I think it was Alberon or something. It's quite a traditional girl's name. So where I got that from, I have no idea. I don't know anybody called Albie, but she said, yeah, you can call me Albie. So I don't know what happened, but I think the question I wanted to ask her was, I always felt that she was upset. Right. We were there, but she said, no, I couldn't work out why there were people in my house.
Yeah. That's funny though, but it's been what I've been saying for years, and I'm not patting myself on the back, but I think this is a very consistent theme in paranormal occurrences, is that if you ever want to know if your house is haunted, redecorate or do construction. Yeah. Because for whatever reason, it really just seems to shake up that energy that might be more dormant for the most part, but man, you start changing things and you'll find out.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think we blocked up a doorway in the kitchen, but we didn't actually do major work, but it needed it. But interestingly, my sister said is that when we moved in, all the insulation in the loft was her old clothes, Albie's old clothes.
Really?
They literally the woman died and gone, well, just throw them up in the loft. So up in the attic was all her old clothes. And I found it quite sad. And obviously talking between ourselves, my sister, me and my mum, we were always it's quite scary. It was quite, we thought, oh God, that was a horrible place to live. But then after the dream, my mindset completely changed. And interestingly, when we talk about the war now, we would say, what war, wouldn't we? We'd say, we talk about World War II, we'd say, oh yeah, but she went in the war. And if you think it was the 20s or it was after the First World, that was the only war they knew.
Right.
So there was little bits where she didn't say First World War, she went the war.
Yeah.
And I found her quite lonely, and she was on her own, and she just had a parrot, and she wondered why all these, I mean, my sister and I, we were 8 and 9, and I don't want to say that we were unruly, but we were mildly feral. So she probably just wondered what all these kids were tearing around the house doing. But
when are these
that
kids
was a strange one.
It is, but it's also fascinating, and you often hear people refer to that like maybe they don't know they're dead. Well, that seems to be definitely the case in this instance, that, you know, she didn't understand that her time had already ended. You know, she was still there in her present, and in her eyes, it was the house that she lived in. And that's what you experienced in that dream. And I don't think that was a dream. I think it was just, you know, I've had an experience like that after my dad passed, and I won't go into the details because I've certainly shared it enough. But we had kind of a challenging relationship, but, you know, and then he passed, and I was living all the way away from home, which was Minnesota at that time. But I lived out here in the north of Idaho, and of course you'll live with that. You think, oh God, you know, there's things I should have said. And it's hard and it's tragic, and you try to find just the path forward because you know that those moments are lost. But then I had a dream much like you're talking about, where it was more real than me sitting here. It was just so vivid, and I was in their home, and suddenly I look over and my dad's standing there, and I've got full recollection, like all my faculties are there. I wasn't like, you know, when you dream and you just kind of accept things because it's part of the dream. It was me, and in my current knowledge and understanding, and I knew my dad standing there was like, oh my God, we missed you since you died. And we had this moment where we came together and embraced, and it was so healing and cathartic. But I know what you're talking about, and there's no way that what I experienced was a dream. And maybe that's me just trying to justify the experience. And certainly skeptics could say, well, it's just, you know, coping mechanism of a grieving mind. And I can't argue with it, but I'm just telling you, it was the most real experience, one of the most real experiences of my entire life. So I think they're very real. I think those are very real moments.
I always think if you wake up and you remember a dream vividly in absolute detail, there's more to it.
Yes.
If you can, and I can recall that dream now as if I'm replaying it back in my head, and I'm sure you can with your father.
Yeah.
And I do believe that if in that instance there's more to it, because I did feel a great relief, because it was almost a haunting. And I think Albie was there because she was waiting for her husband, because there was great grief in her face and her voice when she said, and I understood. And suddenly it was a 30-year-old woman that I could relate to,
right?
Just to say, and the same with your father. And I have a friend of mine passed, really good friend of mine passed a couple of years ago in the COVID times, and he visits me often, and I can have a conversation. And like I said, it may be something that your own psyche projects, but I get great comfort from it. I mean, it's a sword of Damocles, because you love seeing them and connecting, and then you say goodbye again. But I think maybe it's part of the healing process. So I'm with you on that. Yeah, dreams are great foretellers of truth, I think.
Yep, I think so. And I think those connections are real because, you know, I mean, I certainly want to believe it anyway, but that's fascinating. So where do we go now?
So, so many years later, obviously, I'd moved on off the Isle of Wight. I was in my 20s, and I'd moved back to the mainland. I was just working as a plumber outside London for a company. I love plumbing. I was in so many different people's houses. It's such a physical job. You work your brain and everything. So I took to it like a duck to water, and I was doing a property for a property developer in the centre of London. I'll never forget the road called Disraeli Road in Putney, and we were doing a really old Victorian house, but a bit early Victorian, so probably 1840s. And it was so you had a basement, then you had 3 stories, so it's a 4-story typical Victorian house you'd see in a film, where you got the steps going up to the big black door and all the big windows, and so we were ripping it out and doing all kinds of carnage in there. And I usually see the neighbours. I always pop and see the neighbours and say, look, I'm making a lot of noise. If you've got stuff going on or you want me to keep quiet, these things. So I went one side, they were fine. I went to the other side, and there was an old fella in there, Ken, and I still remember him now, bless him. The house was very run down, and he was an old fella. He reminded me of what's Home Alone? Do you know the neighbour out of Home Alone? The old,
sure,
the old,
yep.
Yeah. He looked very similar, and big trousers hanging off of him and a belt that was too big. He was a lovely guy, and he was very frosty when I first met him. He wasn't very talkative, but we'd been there about a month or two, and over the course of that month, I'd see him as we walk out of our steps, and his door's next to this door, and I'd say, hello, Ken, how you doing? He'd be like, oh, yeah. And I'd go down the road and get a coffee. I'd say, Ken, do you want anything? Do you want me to get some bread or a paper? No. And one day I was chatting to him, and I said, Ken, you'd live here on your own? And he said, yeah. He said, my parents bought the house. He said that they've died. He said, their ashes are in the garden. My wife's died. Got very emotional. He said, her ashes are in the garden. He said, and I'll die here. And I said, well, that's brilliant. I said, but he's just bought this place for 1.4 million. This is back in the 90s.
Oh, wow.
I said, you could really, no. If this is where I've been, this is where I'll stay. And he was a lovely old guy in the end. So we had a bit of a relationship. And then one day, I'll never forget, it was a Friday, and I was going out with my girlfriend out somewhere, and I rarely go out. I'm not a big go-outer, but I had to be out somewhere. I think it was a wedding reception or some rubbish. So I had to be home. Sure. And I had an apprentice with me, Sam, he was a very strong fella. He was a lovely guy. He's only young. So we'd done our day's work. It was about 5:30. I had about half hour left on my parking ticket before I'd get a parking ticket, about half hour, 45 minutes. And I've come out the door with all my tools ready to go. Friday night, sun's out, perfect. And then Ken runs out of his house, and I thought his house is on fire. Come out so quick. Jeff, he said, you've got to help. And I said, Ken, what's the matter? He said, I've lost my wedding ring. Oh. And I said, oh, all right. I said, well, I'm thinking to myself, okay. He said, that's the only thing I've got on my wife. I've lost my wedding ring. He said, can you come and help me find it? And I've looked at my apprentice, who's looked at me like, no, we're going. He wants to go out drinking. I said, all right. So I said to my apprentice, look, let's give it 10 minutes. Let's go and have a look. And hopefully, thank you. So anyway, we go into his house. Oh, Brent, it was a hoarder's dream. It was newspapers, boxes. There was a really thin walkway up the stairs that you could barely get up, and my apprentice is behind me swearing, cursing, and going, what are we doing? I said, look, he's an old fella. Let's do what we can. Leads us into his main sitting room. I didn't realise he only lived in one room of this massive house. And it was like a junk shop. There was tables, chairs, carpets, boxes. It was piled up with this little walkway, and he leads me through the walkway. This room's massive, by the way. Okay. Over to the fireplace. I said, Ken, where were you last when you had your ring? And he said, well, I fell asleep in my chair. He said, I've lost weight recently. He said, so my ring's a bit slippy. He said, but I woke up and it wasn't on my finger. So I thought, right, let's start where your chair is, mate. And he's really crying, agitated. I said, look, sit down over there. Take 5. I said, me and Sam will oik all this stuff out and we'll have a look. And I'm thinking, there is no chance. There's no chance. So lift his chair up, turf all the seat out and clean it. No, it's not in there. So we clear about a 10-foot square area. I'll never forget, because the carpet was a red carpet, patterned, but it's quite threadbare. Sure. But it was still very colourful. And so we cleared this area, took all the stuff out of the way, and moved his chair. And there was a little side table, just a little lump of wood on a stick, and I moved that out of the way. We searched, on hands and knees looking. I'm like, I said to Sam, look, we'll have to just expand our search a little bit. And I'm thinking at the time, I've got to go out, and he's swearing and cursing. God, and Ken's crying. It's like chaotic. And so I said, right, we'll put his chair back, we'll put his table back. I said, and we'll start shifting around, no problem. So I pick his table up, and God's honest truth now, I don't know why I did it, but in my head, I'm walking towards this area we've cleaned with the carpet that's dead clean. There's nothing there. I'm walking with a table, going to put it down in this area. And in my head, I say, Ken's wife, I've got to go out tonight. So if you can help me, please. I said, because my girlfriend's going to be really upset if I don't. Honest. Yeah. And I don't know why I said it or why I didn't say it out loud. I said it in my head.
Sure.
And as I'm walking towards this spot, you know what's going to happen now, don't you? As I walk towards this spot, I look on the floor and this ring, and it came into existence. It wasn't there. I was looking at the spot and it went boink, and it was bright gold against a red carpet.
Oh, nice.
And I've thought, no. And I've gone, Ken, is that it? And he said, oh, my God, there's my ring. Picked it up. Solid. I've picked it up. I've given it to him. I'm kind of dazed now. And I'm going, oh, all right, Ken, there's your ring. And he's, oh, thank you, giving us all hugs and all this stuff.
Oh, cool.
And my apprentice, Sam's going to me, that wasn't there. That wasn't there. And I said, I know, mate. I said, I know it. It wasn't there. It wasn't there. I said, I know. Let's put his chair back, get him all comfy. So I said, right. I said, you're all right. I said, I can come Monday and put all this stuff back. He said, no, listen, I'm as long as I've got the ring, I'm happy. I said, well, look, put it on a chain or sellotape it on, do something. I said, because it's going to fall off again. Anyway, he was all right then, stuck him in his chair. And then we've left this, trying to claw our way out of this place. And we got in the van, and all the way home, I had about a 2-hour drive with Sam, my friend. And all the way home, he's going, that wasn't there. He said, that definitely wasn't there. I said, I know, all the way home. And he said, where did it come from? He said, you kicked it. I said, I didn't. I said, I literally walk in and it was there. And
wow.
it was right in the centre of this carpet. It wasn't to the side. It didn't roll or tilt, or it was literally there. And to this day, I'm bemused how that ever happened.
Right.
And why I, in my head, said, look, come on, somebody help me out. But I said, Ken's wife, please help me out. And there it was.
That's cool. Yeah, they call those apports, APPORT, when something is brought into existence by a ghost. And they're extraordinary events. And it's such a neat one. This story is such a great example and a very positive example, because you reached out and thank God, I guess his wife answered.
Yeah, and I didn't know about that or porting, but the weird thing was I was looking to put the table down, so I was looking on the floor, and it just came into existence.
Wow.
And I was stunned. And he was stunned. He sat over there, and I went, is that it? And he went, oh, my God, you found it. And I purposely went to grab it because I thought it was like an illusion.
Right.
I thought I'd try and grab it and it wouldn't be there. But, yeah, it was a gold wedding ring, and he was elated. So, yeah, that's another one of the very strange, and I don't know Sam now because it's very transient in the building industry. You might work with somebody for a week and never see him for the rest of your life, but I'm sure if I could get hold of him, he'd probably say it wasn't there. Never saw all the way home. 2 hours of that I had. 2 hours.
Obviously, it wasn't something he was prepared to understand or deal with, and I don't think anybody probably ever is. But those events are really powerful, and it's by virtue of the size of the event, it's a pretty small event, but it's actually pretty extraordinary that something that was not there suddenly became there. Well, that's the incredible magic of all of this, isn't it?
Yeah, it's again, I'd never seek this. I'm not a paranormal type person. I wouldn't go. I just wouldn't. It was, and at the time, it was like, this is strange, but wow, I can go out tonight. And I do remember saying to my girlfriend, I had a really weird experience today. And she looked at me like, oh, right. And I'm thinking, I won't kind of mention that again. But yeah, that was a very strange one. And like I said, I've been in the building industry now 40 years. And that was probably in my 20s, but several more after that. But never welcomed. And I'd never, I wouldn't want to revisit any of them, to be honest.
No, I got you. I understand. But again, those are positive experiences, both experiences.
Yeah.
Even though as a child dealing with all that stuff was very frightening and scary and uncertain, and that's the part that I guess that makes all of it hard. But I really think that most of this stuff is probably wildly misinterpreted by us because we're presented with events that just aren't supposed to happen according to traditional thinking. But, and then therefore that uncertainty or fear turns it into something terrible and scary. But it's kind of neat to think that, we're probably surrounded by a world of spirits, and they are part of our reality, even though we're not cognizant or aware of them. But they do interact in our experience. And I think events like this are probably much more common than most people would like to admit. But, how many times have you misplaced something? I know I put it there. It's not there.
Yeah.
And then you look around and come back 45 minutes later and it's there. It's like, well, so it could have been a D port and then an A port. I don't know. Just a possibility.
Who knows?
Yeah.
But it was definitely something I'll never forget. It
Wow.
was a strange one. Yeah.
That's exceptional. Yeah. So where are we going next, sir?
Oh, so probably about, I don't know, if I was probably in my late 30s and I was working for another firm, plumbing firm, and it was quite common for them to send you on jobs, just give you an address and say, meet the builder there, or, meet the homeowner there. So I was sent to a job in Chobham, which is near to where this plumbing company was. It's like a little village. And my boss said to me, he said, look, meet John the builder there. Who's I know still today. Meet John the builder there, and he said you've got to move some radiators, change some taps and bits and pieces. Yeah, no problem. So it's the summertime, I'll never forget, and I usually get there early, so I get there for about 7:30. Most builders start 7:30, cup of tea, and then we plough on with it at 8 o'clock, and I got there at 7:30. This building was, there used to be, they were very old cottages, workers' cottages, but they were turned into one premises. So they'd knocked all the walls down inside, and it was like instead of three two-bed cottages, it was now one 5-bed house type thing. And so I pull up on the drive, very, very old place, got to be 16th century, wisteria around the door, very, very English garden. It was lovely. I had no pretense or thought that I'd be going to somewhere that wouldn't, just another work day. So I pull up on the drive, and I'm sat there, and as usual, I've got my flask of tea and I get my paper out. Back then we used to read papers, and I've got my paper out, and sure. And I'm thinking, John will be here in a minute, or he's, So I sit there and I'll look out of my van window up to the building, and there's a little window at the top of the building, which is in the gable end, the pointy bit. There's a little window. Yeah. The window's open, and the curtain, like the net curtain's blowing out, like drifting out. So I think, he's in there. He's already started without me. So I throw my coffee on the floor, and I go and bang on the door, and no answer. Bang, bang, bang. So I think, he's got his ear defenders on or whatever. So bang, bang, bang. I'm going, John. I'm shouting through the letterbox, and I think, he can't hear me. I'll wait for him to come out. So I go back and sit in my van, and I'm reading my paper. I look up, and the window's shut now. Curtains in, window shut. Right. He's got to be in there, because he's obviously making dust, and he opened the window. So I bang on the window, not at all. And as I'm banging on the window, his van pulls up on the drive. Yeah. So I go, you all right, John? He says, yeah, all right, Jeff. I said, yeah, I'm going well, mate. I said, who's in there then? I said, because he's not letting me in. He said, I've got the keys here. He said, from the estate agent. He said, there's no one. I said, no, there is somebody in there. So the window was open. He said, no. He said, look, here's the keys. I said, well, maybe the homeowner hasn't left, Yeah. So, okay. So anyway, he opens this very small front door, very old front door. And he opens this door, and we walk through. Brent, the second I walked through that door, it felt so oppressive. It was like going from a cathedral into a cave. And I remember walking through the door, and the hair on my neck standing up, thinking, I'm not keen on this place at all. And it wasn't dirty. It was just old. It was a real lovely building. Felt really uneasy. So I thought, get a grip. And John the builder's a lovely guy. So, and he's come on, mate, we'll do this, we'll do that. So get all my tools in, and first thing I've got to do is I've got to change a radiator and do bits and pieces. And the next thing I've got to do is change a pair of taps in the kitchen. So I'll bring all my gear in. I think, right, first thing I'll do is I'll put the taps in the kitchen by the sink so I don't forget to change them. So I get the old new pair of taps. I walk in the kitchen, right through the kitchen, big square kitchen, tiled floor, like the old porcelain tile floor. Walked straight across the kitchen, directly to the sink. It's literally from the door, directly to the sink. Put the taps down. I'll do the radiator, so, go out and start draining down, doing a bit. And then John says, look, he says, I'm off to the wholesalers. I've got to go and get some plasterboard and bits. I said, oh, no worries, John, I'll see you in a bit. And I'm thinking, oh, God, why's he got to go? I don't like this place. So, oh, yeah, I'll see you in a bit. And he shuts the door. And I'm up in the loft, as you know, near the tanks. And I hear this, the noise, right, so it was a slap. It was a bang. And it was a really loud thump. So I thought, what's happened? Something fallen over? Have I knocked somebody's picture off the wall? A big hard thump. So I come down the stairs, down the ladder, down the hallway, down the stairs. And I'm thinking, what's fallen over? So I think, nothing's fallen over. I walk in the kitchen, I have a look. And in the centre of the kitchen, on the floor, is a wood chopping board, a really thick wooden chopping board in the centre of the floor. Right, it didn't roll. I didn't hear a coin would go as it settles. It went bang on the floor. So I'm thinking, this isn't right. It hasn't fallen off anywhere. It's 10 foot to every wall, dead centre. So okay, so I picked this wooden. It's quite hefty, a wooden chopping board up, and I put it on the side. Now I'm thinking, I'm going to speed this job through because I'm not comfortable here at all.
Yeah.
So go through my bits and pieces. I've done my radiator. I think, right, all I've got to do is the taps, and then I'm gone. And I don't care if John comes back, I'm not here. I really don't mind. So I think, right, into the kitchen to do the taps. And as I live and breathe, I walked through the door, and in the centre of the floor, where the meat thing was, the chopping board was a little pair of hop-up steps, like your granny might have, that she uses to get in cupboards, the flippy ones, and they've got they turn from a stool into a chair. In the centre of the floor, where this thing was. Now, I didn't clock at first. I walked round it because I'm in such a rush to get out. I walked round this thingy. I go to the sink. I'm unpacking the taps, and I just cringe, and I think, oh my God, I go, that's not there. It's not there. Is it? And I turn round, and there it is. And I just go, right, taps can wait. Throw the taps down. Honest, I get my stuff, and I disappear out the door. And even if I drive by, because it's quite local to me, even if I drive by now, I get goosebumps driving by.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and that was years and years ago, but I'll never forget it. And your brain goes, oh, it fell off the side. And then you go, well, you couldn't have done because look how far it is away from the side. And then you go, no, it fell off the side. And then there's a pair of little steps there. No, I must have put them there. Or somebody's put them. And then you go down all these avenues, and in the end you go, there's nobody in the house. They weren't there. Yeah, I'm checking out. This is done for me. I'll tell you. And again, there was no thought at the beginning of that day I'd seen anything paranormal, or I'd thought about it. It was just another job. And that one was quite a shocker, that one.
But you felt it from the moment that you went in that door. It was just like, pow. Yeah, that's so powerful. Yeah. And again, it's hard to know the nature of what was going on there, but those are pretty profound events. I mean, physical movement of items is, that's huge. That's a very, very powerful experience. But it's funny that you walked right by it. Like you're so focused on doing that. And then it just occurred to you it's like a cartoon moment. It's like walking right by that, the big problem. And then you're like,
yeah, it was. And I didn't want to turn around. I didn't want to turn around. Because I thought, I've just walked. No, you haven't. You haven't. Honest. And I slowly turned around like a cartoon thing, and there they were. And I'm like, no, that's me out. That's it. I left it all there. And then I got in trouble for that, actually, with my company, because they said I didn't finish the job, and I didn't explain. But yeah, as soon as I walked through the door, it felt like going from a bright, airy cathedral into a cave. It literally was so oppressive. And every step I felt like, I don't like this place. But I get that on quite a few. I've been in thousands of homes. Yeah. And there's a few that haven't got to be necessarily old that I walk into and go, no, I don't, I don't like it here. And they could be warm and they could be well furnished, but
Sure.
whoa.
Well, and just think of of course, in the UK and England and Britain and all of that, and I probably all mean the same thing, but those are different terms I've heard. But just the history and the thousands of years of history that are combined on those properties and those areas, and the land remembers. It doesn't always have to be something with the house. It could be the land it's on or whatever. But yeah, I think it's amazing. I've been one time over in the UK, and just being there was humbling because of that history and seeing buildings like over here in the States. If you find a house from the 1700s, that's really something. But over in your neck of the woods, that's much, much more common, isn't it?
Yeah, I've worked in houses that 12th century, 11th century that are still being used as homes.
Isn't that something?
Yeah,
Wow.
it's fantastic. I'm quite tall, so I have to stoop and go in these, but they're all little front doors. But yeah, I've worked in some fascinating places with a hell of a lot of history, and some really old places you would think would be, I don't know, quite oppressive. And I've worked in some beautiful 11th century places that are warm, cozy, bright, and then some Victorian ones. I mean, the Victorians are obsessed by death, and I think it kind of seeps into their architecture. And so it doesn't have to necessarily be old, but yeah, there's so many. Even near me now, there's I think it's a 10th century abbey. It's all crumbled down now, but you can walk around the ruins of a 10th century abbey. There's a lot of stuff goes on over there apparently, but I think it seeps into the soil. I really do.
Yeah, I think it does. With that house, that last one we were talking about, you said it's in your area. Does it have a reputation for being haunted, or like over here in the States, a lot of times we figure, nobody lives there for very long. Why is that? And then you find out maybe in some cases that it's very haunted. There's a lot of activity, but maybe, I don't know. Is that the case over in your neck of the woods?
No, I think there's obviously famous ones.
Sure.
That have, but a majority of places, they're so old, and this house that was workers' cottages turned into one house. That's one of many old places. The one actually, interestingly, across the road is like a sprawling manor house, and it must have been the workers' cottages for the manor house. So anywhere you go around here, there's new houses, but there's some fantastic old places. I mean, going right the way through. So, but there was no indication. I never ever went back to see who lived in there. I think they were on holiday. So, but they obviously never felt. Whether you pick up on it, I mean, I spoke to John, the builder, quite soon after that, and he was like, "No, it was all right. I didn't. No, did you feel weird?" He was like, "No, it was all right." And I'm thinking, either he's not saying, or he just didn't pick up on it. But the second I walked through the door, it was really, I felt noticeably over the doorstep went from light to dark.
Wow.
And yeah, it was very, but no, I'm sure the history is quite deep.
Sure.
In most areas, I mean, because you've got, I know America's quite new in terms of but it isn't. I mean, if you think, the Isle of Wight that I lived on, that was invaded by the Romans. Prior to that, it was Anglo-Saxon and Iron Age, and it's always been invaded. I mean, the name for the Isle of Wight actually isn't the Isle of Wight; it's called Vectis, which is the Roman name when they conquered it. So, if you think of all of that history and seeps into everything.
Yeah, it really does. It's fascinating stuff, and I would love to come back to your area and do some more. When I was there, it was more of a touristy thing, but I would like to come back and at some point and actually walk through some of these areas, like the ruins of the Abbey you were talking about. Yep. That would be fantastic, and someday I hope to make that happen. But where are we going next?
After this job, it's the same company actually, and Mick, the guy that ran it, God rest his soul, he's dead now. He's a lovely guy. I got on with him so well. He's really old school, but very friendly. And he used to do a lot of council and school work. And obviously, over the summertime, all the kids go, and then all the work begins. So you change the boiler or you do radiators. And interestingly, it was a convent Catholic girls' convent that my wife went to. It was her school. I didn't know this when I went there. It was only after a while I said, "Oh, I worked there." And she went, "Oh, I went to school there." So, oh yeah, I was sent to this big sprawling. It was a bit like Hogwarts, really, Harry Potter. This giant building that had 2 chapels and 4 staircases, massive, huge building. And so my boss said to me, "Right, go over and meet the caretaker." I forget his name, but he said, "Meet the caretaker and he'll let you in." And it was only medial task. It was only 1-man job. So I trundle over there and with all my kit and all my tools and meet this guy on the steps of this giant, big cathedral type place. Beautiful building, beautiful. And he said, "Oh, look, I'll let you in." He said, "My flat's on the 1st floor." He said, "I live up there." He said, "So if you need anything, come and get me." He said, "You know what you do?" And I said, yeah, I've got to do bits and pieces. So anyway, I go to my van, gather my tools, and I walk in the building. And my first job was on I think it was the 4th floor. So I had to walk up this giant, big oak staircase, wide, 3 meters wide, beautiful turns in it, carved. It's a stunning place, beautiful place. And I'm walking up the stairs, again, not thinking of anything other than I just want to get this job done and go home type. And I walk up the stairs, and as I get to the top of the stairs and I turn, as I look up the stairs, a nun, old lady nun, turns the next flight to go up. I can even remember her shoes. She had really like clumpy shoes on. I kept thinking, sure, she would have worn trainers or something walking around all day. And you could tell she was old because she wasn't like upright. She was quite bent over. But I could see the side of her face, and I could tell she was an older lady. And she turned that way, and I'm walking behind her. So I'm at that stage. I'm in my 30s, pretty fit. So I'm trundling up the stairs, and so I'm going up 3 flights. So I get to turn the next flight of stairs, and as I look around, she's just turning the next flight of stairs.
Wow.
And I think, in my head, I thought, "Gosh, she's pretty spry for an old lady." She's got a turn of speed. So anyway, turn the next flight, and she just disappears around the next flight, and I get to my floor, and I go about my business. And then I come back down the stairs, all the way down again, to go out the front, get some more stuff off my van. And as I come down to the stairs, there's a front door, big front door, and then corridors go left or right, and you can look all the way down. So to the right, there was another set of doors, and to the left, the corridor right the way down. I think it went to the chapel. As I get to the doors, I look to my left, and there's another nun in the distance that disappears over that way, just across. Wow. So I'm thinking, they obviously don't mind us being here doing work. So get to the mid of the day, and I'm having my lunch, and I go and knock on the guy's door and say, "Look, I'm having lunch now." I said, "I'll be about an hour." He said, "No problem." I said, "I didn't know the nuns were here." And he went, "They're not here." He said, "They left here about 40 years ago." And I said, No, they didn't. I said, "I followed up the stairs." And he went, "Don't be silly." He said, I said, "No, I'm telling you." He said, No. He said, "I don't want to hear it." And he was quite abrupt. I thought, well, that's nice. So I have my lunch, do my work. End of the day comes, 5 o'clock. And I say, go and see him. And I say, "Look, I'm off now." I said, "Job's done." I said, it's all ready for you." He said, "No problem." And he said, "Where did you see the nun?" And I said, "I saw her on the stairs." And he went, he said, "I see her as well." And I said, "So you do see nuns?" And he went, "Yeah, I do." He said, "And I see them quite a lot." He said, "And there's lots of them." And I said, "Oh, right." I said, "Do you see the one on the stairs?" And he said, "Yeah." And before I could say, he said, "You could never catch her." And I said, "No." I said, "She just, every flight, she would just go around the corner." And he said, he lived there. He had a 1-bed flat. And he said, "I lock myself in my flat at night." He said, "I lock myself in." Now, bear in mind, you're in a big building. Right. And I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I won't go out there after like 6 o'clock at night." He said, "I won't go out." He said, "I'll bring all my stuff in." He said, "And I won't go out until the morning." And I said, "Is it that bad?" And he said, "It's bad."
Wow.
Bad. And he wouldn't elaborate anymore. He was really reticent about saying any more. But when he said, he said, "You see?" He went, "Yeah, I see the nuns." He said, "Can you catch her?" I said, "No." He said, "Neither can I." It's very, very strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting that he had kind of a change of heart. Like initially, it's like, "I don't want to talk about this," but then brought it up later. But that's cool. I'm glad that he, I mean, it's one thing to see this stuff, but it becomes so much more powerful when you know you can corroborate it with somebody else's experience. You know, not to say that you're not a believable person, but
No.
it makes sense. Why would it just be you that would see them? And then to hear that, well, it's not. So that is really incredible stuff. And I don't know. I mean, it's you got to wonder why do they stick around? And
I know.
Meaning that they've devoted themselves very religiously to something. And I'm not questioning their spirituality or their morality or whatever, but it is curious to me that they devoted their lives so completely to something, and yet they're still there. And maybe it's by virtue of a sense of duty to that place because they loved it, and maybe that's why they lingered, is to stay and take care of it, and maybe that makes it a good thing. But wow, that's incredible, very incredible.
They were gone. I mean, they were gone before, way before because it was a nunnery.
Yeah.
And then it got turned into a school. So they were gone way before that. But I often questioned that after the event.
Yeah.
And of course, I told my boss, and he was a real down to earth. He was like, "Oh, don't be silly. What's wrong with you?" I didn't. But I thought, well, why? For somebody that's religious, surely they would move on,
right?
And I wouldn't understand why they would want to linger. But I think if you'd been a nun, some of them came in when they were really young. It was a calling to be a nun at their maybe 15, 16 years old. And if they've done 60, potentially 70 years of the same duty, I mean, they weren't out riding bikes and, going on holiday. They were literally, devoted. Praising the Lord.
Yep.
And maybe I often think, what with Albie, I think maybe she missed her husband so much. She was waiting for her husband.
Sure. That was what bound her.
And bound her there, and she couldn't move on, not knowing that she would meet her. Maybe it wasn't her faith, and maybe the nuns stayed because they were doing God's work,
right?
And it can never end, that can it? So maybe they thought,
that's a full existence kind of thing, I guess. But you'd think if anybody has a golden ticket, it would be those people. Like, hey, time to go, cash it in. But no, God bless them. I mean, I gotta respect that. I don't think it's anything dark or malicious. It's just they were just so devoted to what they were doing that they continue doing it. And maybe it's more residual. Maybe it's imprints that they left behind. Maybe they're not even intelligent, but in any case, it's still very real experiences and very powerful. But Jeff, it's been an absolute pleasure, brother. We're cruising in towards an hour here. You got to come back because I know you got more to cover, right?
I have, and some very strange ones, especially my father, because he's done some stuff, and I always chat to him. But it's been amazing to talk to you, Brent, and thank you very much for your time. And like I said, I'm a huge fan, and I'll continue to listen. And you really do give me comfort on the long nights when I'm driving somewhere. It's nice. It's like talking to a friend or listening. It's lovely. So I really appreciate it. And thank you for listening to me and my stories. I can't explain them, and I don't welcome them. I wouldn't want to visit them again, but they are what they are.
Well, thank you for, choosing to come here and share your stories, not only with me, but with our listeners. And we'll definitely get you back for the next part of your journey. But it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. It's been a pleasure to meet you and a pleasure to talk with you. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Brent. Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, that's going to wrap it up for us today. So hope you guys enjoyed the show, and thank you again so much for all your love and support. And remember, if you want to follow the Paranormal Portal, probably the easiest way is to head over to paranormalportal.net. And that's the homepage for the Paranormal Portal. And you'll find links to all of our different social media and sites and information about the shows, including our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/paranormalportal. Or just look for Paranormal Portal on Google or whatever search engine, and you'll find links to our social media such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. So we're kind of all over the place, and we're spreading as well as we can. But anyway, thank you so much for the love and support. Y'all take care, and remember, we love y'all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other, help each other out, find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. Until next time.